We'll never be moved from here. Our lives can live in the seeds we've sown.
Welcome to The Art of Relating, a space where relationship, intimacy, and sacred sexuality become pathways to liberation. Here, every rupture is a teacher, every desire is an opening, and every difference is an opportunity to deeper intimacy. Whether we are unraveling attachment wounds, leaning into conflict with presence, or returning to love as a living practice, this is where we explore what becomes possible in relationship when we choose to stay. I'm your host, Tammy Chow from Somatic Spirit. This episode with Brittany comes after an episode that I did with James, her partner. And Brittany is also a fellow somatic experiencing practitioner and attachment repatterning practitioner. And I was inspired to have a conversation with you, Brittany, because, first of all, the James podcast blew so many people away. And then from a female perspective, I had some friends being like, oh, I really want to hear about Brittany's side of things. I want to know what that first radical liveness process group was like for her. I want to know the perspective of the breakup from your side. Did it actually feel like the right timing? James said that it felt like that for him, and also just to hear from your perspective, what does practice look like for you guys now? And just anything else that comes alive in this conversation.
These are things I love to talk about the most.
Amazing. Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to hear about your take on when I first met you guys at the Radical Liveness retreat 4 years ago. And it was news to me that it wasn't like you were a couple showing up to work on a thing to figure out your relationship. I was shocked to learn that he dropped that bomb of you're not the one at the retreat in front of all of us.
Yeah. That was one of the most brutal moments of my life, for sure. Yeah, I think that it was, let me think back. We had been in just he talks about it in his podcast, so I won't go too into it, but we were just in such a relationship attachment dance struggle. Oftentimes we get matched with our equal and opposite, which is always so humbling, right? When people are with people and they're if you're criticizing the partner that you're with, just it's a very humbling thing to just hold that equal and opposite. Usually, there's something that they're showing you. And James and I were definitely doing that. Our patterns of anxious, which was more me, and avoidant, which was much more him, were big time equal and opposite. So while that was the kind of drama of it, of being in a workshop or surrounded by so many people, I'm pretty sure I'd planned to go. I was the one that was I want to do this, and then kind of coaxed him to come along. And it was sort of I was kind of this is one of the my last ditch efforts for us to have some sort of breakthrough, because the love was so clear. James and I were we loved each other so much. We were best friends. We really, really were. So it was both shocking and also not, because we had spent so many times, and in the back of my mind too, I was aware that our relationship was something has to shift, and if nothing shifts, there's a good chance this won't work.
And so what was it like for you when he dropped that bomb, when he was like, you're not the one?
I mean, definitely a punch in the gut. Definitely a punch in the gut. Yeah, for the rest of that retreat, I was pretty fucked up. I was pretty fucked up, to say the least. Just to be in a space of so much vulnerability, and that training was kind of, the container of it wasn't super tight, not because of Anne, but because there were some other things with the hosting place that made it I imagine you can kind of remember some of the people that were in and out, and getting massages during processes. It was just a really weird space. And yeah, so it was devastating.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
remember it led you into like really deep wounds. And I'm curious if you'd be open to sharing about that in your process and what happened in your process.
You know, it's so funny. I'm like a little bit of a goldfish. I like can't remember. Like when James was describing the process as I was listening to it in the last episode, I was like, wow, I all I remember is like tapping into like the deepest amounts of fear I'd ever tapped into with Anne holding me. I more remember, yeah, I don't remember too much around my process other than like I think I was just really seeing and I was completely enmeshed in it. It wasn't like I was seeing it from a witness point of view. There was no witness online. I was completely in my full anxious wounding, aka like I will not be okay without you. Like I'm so scared. Like I actually like on a level I don't feel like I know how to live without you.
Yeah, I remember it. And yeah, it was almost like,
Feel free to share. You can feel free to remind me.
it's so funny because you were like, I felt like I was punched in the gut because I kind of remember that body positioning of like you just caving inwards and, your mouth just like gaped open. And kind of like the rest of the process was Anne really holding you and you were like kicking and screaming your feet. It was like if we could do parts work, almost like in family constellations, when you could just be consumed by one part or one entity. Like it looked like the deepest anxious attachment, like terror ever. If I remember, maybe it was a little connected to your dad, or I'm curious if you're willing to share about like your journey of attachment and what you've learned from DARE, which is, the modality attachment repatterning and how that kind of contributed to your dynamic with James.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, I came into adulthood with a very insecure attachment style. I think I had a mix of everything. I definitely leaned more anxious in romantic relationships and friendships. I was a little bit more avoidant but I could also be disorganized, of like that kind of come close, go away. I think my dad was in my life, but actually a day and a half after I was born, my dad, because he was a salesman, he was traveling for work. He traveled 5 days a week and was only home on the weekends. He left like a day and a half after my birth with my mom alone. And my mom is also legally blind. So she was like legally blind, alone with a newborn and a 2-year-old.
Wow.
So it was just like, and what she has told me is that she actually would, every time my dad would leave on Monday morning, Sunday night, like clockwork, they would just get in these like blowout arguments. So I think I was feeling like, I just grew up with my dad always leaving. And I was in my mom's field as well, you know? And then I look ancestrally too, and there's all sorts of crazy stuff that happened and parents dying really young, Holocaust survivors, like people getting excommunicated from the family because of having a baby before they were married. It's just like all sorts of things. So there's so much to say, but it created and then growing up, I just had a really stressful childhood, and so, yeah, there were a lot of stressful childhood stuff, unpredictability, a lot of so all of these things kind of culminated in a really like an anxious attachment style.
Yeah. It's so funny because I remember in Montreal when we were eating lunch and everybody's like, James, tell us about when you and Brittany first met. And I was like, I forgot that he had pursued you like so hard. And at first you were like, no.
Uh-huh.
And so, like, I'm just so curious about that. Like, was there any, like, tell us about that? And also, like, was there any ever of that feeling of like bait and switch, where you're like, I had an intuition in the beginning to not be with this man. And now I've been like dragging him through the mud or, whatever those like,
Yeah,
first
yeah.
2 years were.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. I don't know that I have ever framed it that way, but definitely when we first got together, I feel like it could sometimes get that label of like fuck boy, but like I could just tell, I could sniff out that he was like handsome, charming, gregarious, probably had no trouble, quote unquote, like getting women. And I was just really not, I was really not down for that with anyone that I was with. I like could feel it. And I was like, I know what this is and I'm not falling for it,
Mm,
you know? But he was persistent and we did really love each other. I
mhm.
mean, obviously we're married now, but like there was something really, really genuine there.
Was that a pattern that you had before with other partners? Like, was that a pattern you were identifying that you were working through already?
No, no, I think it was actually more through high school friendships where I had seen through middle school and high school. I kind of think I'd seen what, like, I had grown a value for trustworthiness because I had seen a lot of untrustworthiness. And so I think I just like had always been inclined towards it was kind of a safety mechanism, but one that was actually kind of intelligent of like, I'm not going to go for someone that I know what they're gonna do. I know you know, I've seen this before, I've seen my friends go through it. So, but I actually went to the other extreme where I made myself incredibly unavailable. So I would not put myself out there. I wouldn't really take risks, or if I did, it was like very calculated. And more of my work has been like having to like undo that of like let's like actually take more risks. And it's not really my work anymore, but at a certain point in my work it was like I needed to actually take more risks and put myself out there more. I was so like I'm going to make sure I don't get hurt, so I'm not even going to try, and I'm definitely not going to do it with someone that I know is probably going to hurt me.
And so then how did it feel when you took a risk and it was, like, kinda hard for those first 2 years?
Well, we fell in love, and so the, like, chemical cocktail of that and the honeymoon phase, I don't know that I actually did, or maybe it was the way that I processed the breakup when we did break up, but I don't know that I ever went into that place of, like, I'm never gonna try again. I don't know that it actually, like, hit me in that kind of way of, like, "Wow, you were one way and now you're another way," because I kinda knew it all, and I was learning a lot of attachment stuff. So it was I had some framework around what I was dealing with that also gave me a lot of compassion and more patience as opposed to like this is characterologically who this person is. I was like not who he is, his avoidant attachment style.
I feel like it's so nuanced in this murky territory because it's like there's so much language out there that's like, if a man is avoidant or, he's not worthy of you, you should just leave as soon as possible. And then there's also like, for me, a pattern has been as a practitioner, kind of like this way of healing men, like if I just give you the right modalities and right tools and right practitioners, then you might one day become who I really need you to be. And I'm just curious if you could speak to that, like, because I'm sure people who are listening, like women who are listening, might be like, when do I know it's right to step away? And like, when am I doing this at the detriment of my own energy? Like, I'm just curious what your experience of that is.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll first say, and I feel like there was so much in that, so I might need you to like re up me, but I think the first thing I want to say is that when James and I, part one of our relation, like pre breakup, that was a situation of like, I actually should have broken up with him. Like, that was one of my biggest takeaways was being like, oh, this was someone who like wasn't willing to meet me. Like, there were some really clear and healthy requests that I had. Not to say I was clear and healthy, but like wanting to step into containers together and let's grow together, right? That weren't there because we were equal and opposite. We really were. We really, really were. So it's not so much like, is he avoidant or not? Because actually, part of his avoidance, I like to sometimes, I appreciate attachment language. And at a certain point, I also like to let it go because James and I do this work, the yoga of intimacy, and we talk about alpha and omega energies, these two kind of polar energies that are sometimes alpha maybe more linked to masculine, omega more linked to feminine. And that alpha energy is, James has so much alpha energy. And there is, like, if we had a Venn diagram of like alpha energy and avoidance, there's a little bit of an overlap. There's like, I feel like the avoidance can be like the shadow of the alpha energy in a way, because alpha energy is so empty and freedom driven. And so actually James's avoidance is something, now the way that we work with it and the way that we hold it is something that I love. Like, I love that he's so consciousness oriented and so freedom driven, right? Like, he really does not, and it keeps my shadow in check. Any ways of trying to like control or grip or manipulate or hold on to, seek a false sense of safety outside of myself, right? Or in egoic identity, he's going to shake me off real quick, you know? So in a way, I would say, like, if you can learn how to dance with it, the very thing that you might dislike in your partner might actually have roots in the very thing you love about them. But I think, to your question around the breakup piece too, like, I think the biggest thing for me has always been like a willingness to grow. Are you willing to wake up to certain things? Like, and always having to double check of like, okay, if I'm holding that standard for him, am I willing to wake up? Because oftentimes what I have found, this is the last piece I'll say about it, is that if there's something in James that's really not willing to wake up, because he's pretty like ready, especially at this point, like how he was talking about being developmentally like not there and then there. He's like, I want to wake up, like, for himself, not for me, not for our relationship, for himself. He wants to wake up. And for his life, for me, he wants to wake up. But like, if there's something that's not budging, usually that's a sign that there's something in me that hasn't woken up yet.
Ugh, let me just sit with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, obviously, in our radical aliveness container, we all really deeply know that, I was going to follow up. It's like sometimes I have these two threads and I'm like, which way do I go? I want to just write down the one thread that I was thinking. Well, you were saying V1 of the relationship, like pre breakup, there was a little bit of time where he was like unwilling to do that. And so that's when you kind of knew, like, this is not working for me.
Well, I think I was too in my anxious patterning that I didn't, and that was the healing that I found in the breakup, was like the way that I would cling. I'm also a Taurus moon, so stubborn and like can like really want to like stay steady, loyal. And so I was clinging, even though a part of me was like, this isn't working. I couldn't even, that was so scary to lose this, that even like let myself go there because I was too in my fear body.
And did it happen then mutually, or who decided?
He definitely decided. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely decided.
right.
Yeah. Because I couldn't. I
Yeah.
couldn't
Oh,
decide.
I have chills.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah. I let it go.
and when that happened, yeah, like, I'm curious, did it feel right for you in the moment, or what was that like?
No, definitely not. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely not. Like, maybe hypothetically in like the ninth dimension. I think I was like 8 dimensions deep in anxious attachment. I think I had to go as far to the ninth dimension to consider that there's some part of me that like was, you know.
Right.
I was so because like, we would just go through storms of like huge attachment rupture, fighting, 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 and then we would have these periods of like, oh, we're okay. And I would get glimpses into our relationship, which was amazing. So sweet, and like we were, we fit, we work together, but so those kind of like, it's like the breadcrumbs people talk about. It's like those breadcrumbs I just like would not let go of.
And like when he broke up with you, did you fight for it? Were you like, did you almost like not let him break up with you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was like fighting for it a little bit. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're just going to throw this all away? And in that time because our dog got hit by the car and died a day and a half after we broke up.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I think we were again, it was like a honeymoon because the pressure of the attachment, especially for him, was no longer there because he was leaving. And so we had actually after our breakup, the next couple of days were really beautiful, really beautiful. So I was just like, yeah, I was definitely fighting it. I really didn't want it to happen.
Oh, that gives me chills. That reminds me of like when me and Eric were also breaking up, and it was like kind of like the most spacious, beautiful week ever, because suddenly you lift all of this pressure and projection off of each other. And I remember it feeling like a clearing when you could like really see each other clearly. And it's so confusing because you're like, wait, why are we doing this? Like we're so perfect.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I so remember that time. I like couldn't believe that that was happening. It was so painful to imagine.
Yeah. It was a really brutal time. It was a brutal time. And we had been together for years. I was like convinced, I was like, he's the one and all of that. And so to have to like go through that dissolution was pretty intense.
What helped you during that time and how are you getting through that? Like modalities, resources?
Man, it's so funny you asked that because when I was in it and I was like getting to the like real healing empowered place, I was like, I need to write a fucking article about the thing, like a step-by-step guide to how you get through a breakup. So I do have some very, very concrete things. I mean, one, just to say that like, I hear some of my friends who are so beautiful and like, there are people who out there like go through breakups consciously. I was pretty fucking bitter, which was part of my work was like, it was so much anger at him, but ultimately it was anger at myself of like, I was the one that kept saying yes
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over. And I really it's a really actually very empowering stance that sometimes when I hear people talk about how awful their partner is them, or when they break up and they're talking about how awful, and I was there, I was that person complaining, but like the reality is you kept saying yes to it, right? I kept saying yes to it. So the anger, it got initially for the first like 2 months, it was really projected onto him, but it was really just like so much anger at myself. You know, James was just being James, and oak tree is just being an oak tree. And if you don't like that flavor of shade or that type of leaf, like go find another tree, you know?
Yep.
So I just I think there's a lot of freedom and self-responsibility. So that was one piece. And then I had a daily dance mandate where I had to dance every day. I reached out to so many people. I really let myself be connected. I talked with someone every day. I reached out to people I'd heard of or that I was like loosely connected to, but I could feel different flavors of wisdom in different. So I reached out to them. And I think and then also I got to give a shout out to Byron Katie, who I actually experienced a lot of transmission through her books and freedom. I can't say I actually ever really did a full worksheet, but just reading her book, my system, I understood. Because in certain ways, when you're in that much suffering, your identity is very broken and porous. And I think that allowed for a lot of those teachings to actually land really, really deeply.
Like could you share maybe one or two teachings that really really landed during that time?
Totally. So, one of the most painful things for me was that I would imagine him talking about me to mutual friends.
Oh
You know?
God.
And again, I was imperfect, you know? We,
Yeah.
of course, saw like the rawest, most vulnerable sides of me. And there was fear of him talking about that with other people, of just like how fucking intense I could be, you know, or whatever it was. And so it would be like imagining him talking of me to other people about me, imagining him being with other people, like dating someone new or sleeping with someone new. I imagined like, you know, his family, on and on and on. And it was through Byron Katie. I don't know exactly like how she worded the teaching, but essentially like just like getting knocked over the head with her being like, notice that everything is happening in your mind. Like, oh my God, I'm not actually, the only thing I'm suffering from is from images playing in my mind. And when I was able to see that, and it's different to like see it and think about it intellectually, it like fully landed in like my whole body, my whole being, of like, wow, like anything outside of this present moment is just a projection. It's just a projection. And so that freed me from a lot of suffering of like these mental images of all these things, and just being like, that's the only thing I'm reacting to is these images and ideas created by me.
Okay, but to play devil's advocate for the anxious attachers, including myself, you know, like the part of me that like it's like I could cognitively know that at one point, but it's like how do we detach from that? And also like, you know, that like addiction to almost being like, well, but like what if it does happen? What if he does sleep with someone? Like, you know what I mean? Like almost like the mind's fixation of like if I'm not worrying about this and it happens, like what is the fear, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Such a good question. I mean, I think also in that there is a certain level of like surrendering to to feeling the pain of that, right? Cuz okay, blah blah blah, he does sleep with someone else. What's the pain of that? It's like, whoa, that's like one more level of like this is over. It's one more like dropping in of like this is the new reality, right? Which is so painful. So painful. So I think sometimes that the fixations are like almost like treading water desperately, so that because we don't want to have to feel what would happen if we stopped.
Would you recommend that somebody then feel every single projection? Like almost like if this happened, like actually let themselves feel the sensations of all of that? Like, what would you recommend?
I mean, I was also doing a ton of somatic experiencing at the time. I was meeting with my practitioner twice a week and did not miss a session, that's for sure. And I was also really resourcing myself. So I was really like, healthy distraction is no joke. I don't think that it actually, because the attachment wounding is a trauma, right? It's not helpful to go into the heart of the trauma, especially alone. So I was fucked up. I was like full on spiraling in a zombie state for months on end. And I didn't move off my best friend's couch for like 2 weeks, genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
So just to say, for anyone who's just like thinks that they're dying, I also thought I was dying. And I also didn't know how I could ever let go or make it through. But yeah, so I think like not necessarily, if you're gonna feel it, it's good to do it like in relationship if you can.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Like with the
Um
practitioner who knows how to hold it and titrate it and
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And also just like even with a friend, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I feel like part of the art of a breakup is that there is no like perfect way to go through it. It's like it's oftentimes a suffering fest, but in my experience, that level of suffering was equal and opposite to the level of expansion that I then experienced on the other side.
Oh, I have chills. Yeah, I'm curious, like, after that fucking hell of what, 8 months, right, of your breakup. And then James tells the story in his episode of how you guys overlapped on a 3-month silent retreat and you guys overlapped for 1 month. And then he talks about like afterwards when you went on a walk and he dropped to his knees and he looks up and he sees you as like Kuan Yin, as this bodhisattva that's like been here all along. And he's like, I'm a fucking idiot. I think some of us would like to know, what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I can remember it so vividly. It was, so interesting. We were a month in silence, and just some context around this retreat was so James and I have the same Dharma teacher, Rodney Smith, and it was Rodney's last in-person retreat was to teach a month long at the Forest Refuge. And the basis of mine and James's relationship is we are equals in our spiritual ferocity, I'll say. And, we met on a 3-month retreat and we have sat many long retreats together. And so it's that retreat for my Dharma teacher to sit his final retreat was like, even when we broke up, we both knew we were going to be at that retreat. I think he didn't know if I had maybe backed out because we were broken up and I didn't want to. But it was cool because that retreat actually was kind of like my goal. I was like, I want to be healed enough to be able to sit that retreat knowing that James is going to be there and not just be in like excruciating pain. So it kind of became this like goal that I had in my healing, which I know sometimes that's like not the thing to have, but for this, it worked well. And so we had sat a month-long retreat, and I had some pretty big openings during that retreat. And so did he, for sure. Both of us. It was a life-changing retreat, to put it lightly. And yeah, when we were walking around, we would do this walk that takes like 45 minutes and take 5 hours.
Mm.
To walk. It's just like walking and talking and just in this very, I think there was like almost like an altered state. We were also in the dark, and I felt him seeing me clearly in that moment. And him seeing me was also me seeing myself clearly in that moment. Yeah, because I think in that moment I was talking about the amount of power that I had gotten in touch with during our breakup. And yeah, it just felt like clear seeing. And not just me, but also me with myself.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think was at the same moment that you were almost like, wait, do you want to get back together? Like him asking that?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm a little bit of a goldfish, so I don't fully remember, but I think that was the moment that he had kind of alluded to it on the first walk, something around like being together or something, or maybe I was just feeling it in the field. Like I could almost feel it coming. And then, but I could feel also his guardedness around not going there. And then, yeah, I believe in that moment, there was some level of like, I want to be with you.
And how did you take that? What was your immediate reaction?
It was so beautiful because I no longer felt like I needed him to be okay. So at that point, I had gotten to the point in my healing arc, and I really I ran that breakup like a marathon and came in first place. Like I really showed up to it.
Yeah.
Like I am not going to waste this suffering. I'm going to use every drop of this suffering to grow, which has kind of always a little bit been my natural tendency. But yeah. So I think there was almost a part of me that was just like, wow, this might be happening. I don't think that I was like, yes, absolutely. I think I was like, this actually might be happening. And I was so happy. I
Mm.
was so excited.
Aw.
I wasn't like cold and detached of like, this may happen or not. And either way, I'm completely equanimous. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I love this man.
Oh my God.
It's good to be together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That gives me chills because it's like I could feel my protective parts already coming up, after all that healing to then, my expectation would be like, no, like after all that, that protective part that's like after all that you've put me through, and feel that guarded part that would almost like need to make him work for it or, you know, make him suffer more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we definitely in our getting back together, there was definitely like resentment that had to be cleaned up. Like the RA retreat was the one where he said you're not the one. That was like one of the biggest ruptures we've ever had. So that was by nature of like being in a group of people, all these things that we had to do a lot of cleaning up. And then also I had some pretty strong, like non-negotiable stipulations around, and it wasn't just of like being with him, it was like actually being with anyone. These are my non-negotiables. These are the things that I absolutely need, and I'm not so entwined in that anxious patterning that I feel like I'm like gonna just like say yes, even if he doesn't do those things. It was like, no, if he doesn't do those things, I'm not going to be in this relationship. And I could really feel I was always in touch with like, no matter what happens, I now actually know, which I didn't know before, that I would be okay.
Yeah, I love that. What were the non-negotiables that you came to and did you kind of learn that through the process of suffering through this breakup?
Totally. I mean, I think like there was a level of where the non-negotiables. I mean, one of the ones with us was around intimacy work. That was one that I like named right off the bat because our intimacy, it would be, it's not like our thing wasn't necessarily that we like didn't have like beautiful lovemaking. It was just there was the avoidant dynamics in the lovemaking of avoiding it or and then I would get anxious for it and use it as like a self-soothing, like I'm okay, it was so messy. And so that was definitely one that was a non-negotiable for me of like, if we get back together, this is something that because I also knew like, I didn't want to, I was like, I love making and it's one of my like favorite ways to express myself with my loved one. And I won't subject myself to not I didn't want to have a life that wasn't getting to thrive,
Yeah, totally.
And I knew I could have patience in that process,
Yeah,
but there were things that I was like, this is what I want
right.
with whoever I'm with,
Mm,
and if that's with you, that's awesome, and if that's not with you, that's okay too.
mm. And you said he was resistant at first, right?
So when we first initially were getting back together, he took full ownership of that part of our part one relationship intimacy struggle dynamic. So he initially like actually I think on the first walk he may have apologized to me saying like I'm sorry for my side of that. I'm really sorry. Like I see what I was doing that I wasn't willing to own before. So, but then when actually like we got back together, rubber meets the road, there was still a lot of resistance to it. It wasn't like in the same kind of like outright like I'm not going to do that way, but it was more in the like dodging it, avoiding it, not following through when we say we're going to do something together, go on this call, this book, it was like I had to keep being the one that was like, let's do this, let's do this. And yeah.
And so at that point, like for you, is there kind of like a timeline thing? You know what I mean? Like of when you know that somebody's not meeting you in this non-negotiable?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think we got like really, really I just had to get really, really concrete, of like we need to like sign up for this mentorship or we need to go to this retreat, And it was definitely much more. But the thing is he was open. He was open. He was like, I will go to the retreat. I will sign on to this call. Yeah. I will read the book with you.
How do you, I think, because many women can relate to this, how do you toe that line between when we're almost like giving an ultimatum, like, this is kind of the end of my rope and this is the timeline. And if this isn't met, like I'm out, like I know we can't motivate that way, but how do you not do that?
Totally, totally. Yeah. Well, I think that like there's a difference between an ultimatum and a boundary, right? An ultimatum has a little bit more of a manipulative quality to it, right? Like I'm saying that there's an ultimatum because I want to make you do this thing versus a boundary is like you can do what feels right for you, right? There's like a freedom of like not trying to control the other, but it's like I'm so clear in this for myself. And when that is uncoupled, right? Like there really is like the person can feel that when you're really genuinely like, this is my truth. This is like who I am. And this might not be like your cup of tea. You might not be into this, flavor. And that's okay. Right. So there's a self-confidence in that, not trying to manipulate in that, and a clarity from the heart that the other person can feel and they'll respond to. Like oftentimes the person's response will tell you if you were communicating from a boundary or an ultimatum.
And I think it has so much to do with energy too and like constriction in the body. Like if I rewind back to like, in my relationship with Eric, it was very ultimatumy because I was so constricted and I was in such like states of freeze and my trauma and I was doing a lot of work, but there was a way in which I still expected him to be the savior. Like if he did what I needed or if he changed, then I would be okay. Versus like, I feel like the answer is kind of like, I have to be responsible for going to the depths of my own hell, which I have now over the past 4 years. And it's such a different energy when I'm relating and now dating and like looking for my life partner now of like, this is me, this is who I am. And it's a much more expansive feeling to name the things I need and the things I want and my non negotiables. And I find that men are actually like excited to want to please me, you know,
Yes.
because they
Yeah.
actually want to be able to serve and please. And also it's been funny, like on my dating journey of one of the sticking points for me that's been painful is like, I also have like a spiritual fervor like you and James. And I think that's why I love you guys and why we've kept in touch all these years. And that's something that I've been curious about, like in my own meeting my life partner, how important that is, or if they also need to have the same language or similar shared practice, spiritually. And I'm still working through this trigger myself because my mom really shamed my spirituality growing up because she witnessed my grandmother, who was extremely Buddhist, but kind of in a neurotic, like survival way after immigration, which makes sense. And thank you, Grandma, for praying to Kuan Yin because that's, I think, why we are here and like healthy. So grateful for her spirituality, but it was then shamed. Mine was like really shamed. And I think I really took on my grandma's spirituality. And so now when I'm dating, that happened in my 6 year relationship and then some relationships after where almost like all their boxes are like we fit so well, then it's almost like they might have some trauma around spirituality where the word divine or God triggers them, or they might make fun of my checking in with an astrologist every 8 months, or like the things that for me are just my deep wisdom. And so there's this deep part of me that's like, I feel unseen if I can't be seen in my fullness, if somebody doesn't understand my spirituality. And clearly, there's a lot for me here that still feels constricted because it's like, I need them to see me in this certain way for me to feel valued. And so, yes, I wanna do that work, and does that also mean, like, I can loosen my grip on that being a non-negotiable? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally, totally. I would say like it's kind of like that with everything, right? Like in every relationship there's going to be like, I don't know that any of my non-negotiables were really like super hyper specific traits. And people might have that, like they might have like, you need to be a Buddhist to be with me, or whatever it is. But I don't know that any of mine were ever quite like that. But it was like with the spirituality, for example, I would be so curious what would actually be, I have to give an example to be able to point to what I'm like feeling is the non-negotiable, is like if I was with my lover or someone I was dating and I said like, as I was like walking this morning, I just felt like the divine was just like glowing everywhere, and it just like opened my heart so deeply. And he made fun of that in some way. And in that moment, I show him with my body, with my sound, genuinely how that impacts me, which like might sound and look like, ow, like, oh,
Mm,
oh, showing him how much that hurts
yeah.
when he says that. What would actually be the deal breaker for me would be watching his response, right? So
Mhm.
I'm just showing him his impact on me. Like when he makes fun of me like that, this is my response. And that actually he might be like, what? Like it's stupid, or I don't know, whatever someone like that would say. But if he actually saw that and leaned in and said, like, I'm so sorry, or, this is a part of you that I see I really don't understand, or something like that, some way of like leaning in. That's the difference to me. So it's not like they have this or they don't have that, because what I have learned with James in my relationship is that James and I are not the people we were when we met at all. And the reason that we keep growing isn't because we were like a perfect fit right from the jump. Like there are so many ways that we both could have been with different people and been totally fine. But we grew together, right? Like in moments where let's say that did happen with him and I, it never has, but like, let's say it did happen with him and I, that might actually be the very first start to him starting to open to his own spirituality, right? It's like in that way, that's kind of the alchemy of relationship. We're like waking each other up all the time. And so I really feel like that would be more of the, like, place that I would be.
Yeah,
I'm like, "Oh, is this person willing to wake up
right.
to this or
Yeah.
not?"
Yeah. Or like wake up to relating or like caring about what matters to you and not necessarily so much are they willing to wake up to my version of spirituality?
Totally. And even if you broke down my version of spirituality, like, what would it be? It might be like, I want them to have their heart really open. I want them to be really present. I don't want them to be wrapped up in the material world. Again, just through your own letting the way that they're acting, the way that they're showing up, letting them see how that impacts you,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
definitely. Right.
Like in a moment where they're not present, just saying like, "I feel so lonely right now."
Mm,
Right? You're at
mhm.
the table
Right.
and they're like scrolling on their phone or talking about sports. You're like, "I feel so sad and lonely right now."
Mhm.
And like that's
Yeah,
gonna wake them up. So that's
totally.
kind of the around people can grow and change dramatically. And I think that we just writing people off left and right because they don't have this or they don't have that or they're not exhibiting this trait. But it's actually like we make our relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
Not 100%, but in a big way we make our relationship.
Yeah. That happened with somebody I'm in a dance with relating recently because, they have their own triggers around the word divine or God or whatever. And I found myself going down that rabbit hole. I could feel the constriction in my chest. I could feel it in my throat. And I was still going off and I was like trying to tell them about God. I was
Yeah,
almost like trying to tell them so that they could get it. Not so different from sounding then like an evangelist, in Santa Monica holding up a sign saying,
totally, totally.
which I've totally made fun of. and they were like, if this is what we're going to spend our time doing together in this relationship, whatever we're forming, it may be a problem. And it kind of put me in my place. And they were like, what is your intention here? Are you trying to change me? And that kind of like woke me up out of my cloud of like aggression. And I remembered to sink into my vulnerability. And I was like, no, actually, it has nothing to do with you. I want to feel seen in my fullness. I want to feel admired. I want to feel loved. I want to feel accepted. And they were like, yeah, like basically they were like, I'm choosing to be relating with somebody that like lives in a different country. Do you think I don't admire you? And also, like, when you said it that way, it makes me want to open and listen to you more. Like, now I'm leaning in, and so it's like micro moments like that of me having to remember that that's actually the shared spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah, because that's such a question of like, and just to be clear, like this is like a forever life learning for me in relationship, but like, and I think for most people in relationship is like I want my partner to change. I want, like, how do we live with, like, I want my partner to change and actually, like, what I want in this relationship is unconditional love? How could it possibly be that a paradox of unconditional love and I want my partner to change? Or this thing about my partner bugs me or doesn't feel right? Like, how for those things to coexist? And oftentimes it's actually just like, and it's really fucking hard because you are being so vulnerable. There's no you did this. It's literally you do something, and then I let that express across my body, in my voice, in my emoting, like how that impacts me. And the more, especially for freedom driven partners, it's really hard if you're talking about things in the past, even if it was 5 minutes ago or a day ago, let alone like 3 years ago. But like the thing that wakes consciousness up, it happens in the present moment. And so if they do something and it hits you in some way, to be able to show them in that moment. Like when I show James in that moment, immediately he understands and consciousness naturally wakes up. It's like the law of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Just wake up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
My own system is like an oracle,
Right.
right? Unless it is something, if consciousness isn't waking up, then usually that means there's something here that really, really doesn't have to do with him, or I am in some way, there's some part of me that's trying to manipulate, is when I don't get feedback from him or the flow gets stunted or doesn't feel right. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yes, and I would like to like ask a follow-up question to like if so, like some people have like missed out on James's podcast or whatever. But I think it like kind of flows into what you guys have showed us of your practice now, working with Justin in London and the yoga of intimacy. And when like talking about I see, I feel, which I think is what James calls practice. And I know there's more to practice than just that. But there was like a moment on the podcast when he said like, oh God, we don't even process anymore. Fuck, shoot me in the face, which, and sometimes it's like, I can see how for some people in relationship, that could feel almost like incomprehensible. Like, how can you not process? Like, what is this magical practice then? Like, how does it work? Like, so I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think it may have been a little bit more hyperbolical when he was saying
Yeah.
that, because there are times like I think the truth is because we do these practices and we do them daily, not to say we're always perfect about it, but pretty much if we have time to, if we're not like traveling and on airplanes or whatever, not literally not in the same physical place as one another, we practice and every day. And that keeps the pipes clean,
Hmm. And so,
right?
what
And
is
also,
practice in case nobody's listened to James's version?
yeah, yeah. So we practice, we have been blessed with having London Winters and Justin Pierce, who are a married couple, and they teach the yoga of intimacy. James and I have studied pretty intensively with them at this point, and their practice is essentially there's a set of different practices that you do. So each day when we practice, we have our own solo practices, and the practice is really based in polarity. So the polarity could be like labeled as, it's called alpha and omega. Some people will kind of call it like form and formlessness, or masculine and feminine. And so the omega, which is kind of, at least in our sexing, more of the part that I embody, although it's much more nuanced than that. Part of the reason why the teachers don't use the words masculine and feminine is to not have people get stuck in gender roles. And you can be embodying both at the same time on different levels. So it's a whole wild art, and it's been the best fucking thing of my life. Maybe the second best thing to the Dharma, but I'm not going to make a list actually. But it's a really great thing.
Yeah.
It's been a really great. So we have our own solo practices. And so my practice is really, I practice something called the receptive breath. And it's a practice of no longer me breathing myself, but allowing life to breathe me. And also, and becoming deeply, entering deeply into my body, entering deeply into my feeling, and essentially just like immersing myself so fully in feeling the entirety of the present moment, feeling the entirety, and letting the present moment like impact every cell of my body, letting the present moment move me, right? Because there's so much training that we have on what's appropriate movement, what's not appropriate movement. Like if I'm like on an airplane, I'm not going to start like rolling around and like throwing my hands around in the air and like kicking my leg up, even though that might be what my body wants to do. Right. So there's so much like, and what happens when we stop, like when we actually let our bodies start moving the way our bodies naturally want to start moving. And in this receptive breath practice, the body starts to move itself. There's a deep, it's really just a deep practice of surrender. There's a lot of different things that I do in my solo practice, but I would say the receptive breath is like the main practice that I do to really get in touch with me, and also to clear away any gunk that, any residue psychically, emotionally, that like it doesn't feel like it needs to be brought up between me and James, or might get in the way of me really being almost like the canvas for the present moment.
So beautiful. And so then when you enter the room into practice together, what is that like?
So it's the best. Although not always. Many days, like they always say, our teachers always say, London specifically always says, like, you're not supposed to, the idea isn't that you show up like happy, horny, and grateful all the time, right? This is an intimacy practice, and sexing is a big part of the practice, but it's more of like opening up and being willing to feel whatever it is that's here, right? So resistance here, anger here, whatever. But the solo practice is to clear off stuff that really doesn't need to, like, I don't need to like bring all of my frustration or anger or whatever onto James. That's just like not very loving. So the solo practice is getting embodied, clearing things that I don't want to bring into the practice space because it doesn't feel loving and it doesn't feel necessary. So you feel the sovereignty in that. And then when we come into practice, we sit down across from one another. And it's funny, I'm looking at my practice area. We sit down across from one another and we start breathing together. We make eye contact. And so we're breathing in sync with one another. We're making eye contact, and we usually do an invocation, some sort of like prayer or intention setting for the space. And we start with this I see, I feel practice, which there's a number of practices that we do, but the I see, I feel is kind of the main one. And essentially we go back and forth of one of us being the seer, the other being the feeler. The feeler related to omega or the feminine, the seer being related to the masculine. And usually James actually starts as the feeler. So he starts with the I feel and I start with I see. And so we might sit down and he might say, I feel shut down because I don't know if I'm like able to show up today. And I might say, like, I see the love of my life no matter what he's showing up with, or I see the pain that you're carrying from what happened yesterday. I say whatever I genuinely see. So I'm not like, I'm really just, and the idea of the seer is you are, the idea of the feeler is to be fully immersing your own feeling, like really practicing immersing in your feeling. The seeing is like all of that attention. You have no attention on yourself. In that way, it's a very egoless state. And all of your attention is just on seeing the other.
Right.
So we do that practice. There's a lot I could say about the practice, but that's at
Mm.
least one of the practices that we do every day.
Yeah. And I remember you saying that you kind of give 10 minutes to each person. You kind of like time it, right? So that the seer stays the seer, the feeler stays the feeler. So there's not that like back and forth. What it's like, let me share my experience. And then the other person makes it about them immediately thing happening.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. 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 It's you stay in those roles. And we have a timer that we set that says like switch roles. Now we're switching practices. Also do an I want practice. And so one person will say like, maybe he'll say like, I want you to start breathing more deeply and moving your hips, right? Or something like that. Or like, I want you to hold me and just and be present with me, right? There could be so many things. Or I want to close my eyes and just be here together right now without doing anything.
Mm,
Right? So it really could be anything. It could be, I want a foot massage,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then there's things that you can do, like, if your partner asks for something that you really don't want to do or feels like would be crossing a boundary. Because oftentimes the things your partner wants from you are the things like if I'm feeling like bummed and he's like, I want like fun, bright, like pixie, right? That's like the opposite of how I'm feeling. But in this practice, body leads first. And actually, oftentimes, because he's asking that from me, the alchemy is starting to move into that other thing. And there's an edge that you play with extending, right? And really touching into willingness from this devotional space. Like, loving this man. And do what serves him, but also I don't want to override any boundaries. So there's a whole art to that. It's we could spend another 2 hours talking about it, but
Yeah.
um,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's a really beautiful practice.
Well, I think that we should down the line just like have an episode devoted to this because I know that you're assisting London and also I think that you and James are also working with couples now.
Yep, a little bit. Yep.
Okay, amazing. I really do want to have an episode where we like I just want to focus on the practice and what you've learned and I guess before we end like how has this way of relating and in presence and devotion like changed your relationship?
Oh my goodness, so dramatically. So dramatically. I mean, one is that we're pretty free of resentment. Like we there's not many at this point I can't think of anything that's like built up that I feel resentful towards James. I also don't feel like there's anything that like really anything that we hide from each other. There's nothing that like I say with my friends or he says with his friends that we wouldn't share with one another. Not to say we tell each other every piece of gunk that comes through our minds,
Mhm.
because that's not like both of us are very clear that like our minds are. I remember a spiritual teaching of like your mind is a cesspool, and I remember being like that is so helpful
Yes.
because our minds like yeah that's not who and what we are.
Yeah.
But I would say yeah like it's we actually just get to love each other and have a lot of fun together,
Mm,
and we get to where we are growing spiritually and sexually together. And speaking of the London, our teacher talks about her like sexual life being a spiritual wasteland, and when she got with her partner and into these practices, became a sexual odyssey, sexual waste odyssey. I don't know that we were in quite a sexual wasteland. I don't know that I would use that term, but we were definitely struggling and couldn't be further from our reality now, these practices. And I think, again, both of us being people who long to grow spiritually, these practices have taught us what actually it is to be, how to use relationship for spiritual growth
Yeah.
in a way that I've never heard taught before, in the
Right.
way that they teach it. Not to say it doesn't exist, but they're just my teachers. And to be in a relationship where it's also aligning with my deepest purpose is something really special.
Yeah. Beautiful. Oh, that's the dream.
Mhm.
I'm curious if you'd want to share anything, like if people want to work with you one-on-one, or if you have any containers coming up, if there's anything you'd want to share.
Right now, I'm trying to think if I have anything coming up. Mostly one-on-one right now. Touching the Earth Somatics is my business. touchingtheearthsomatics.com. I do work with people one-on-one. And if there is more, I'll let you know. I can't remember. There's something that I was like, oh, I need to mention this on the show, and now I'm forgetting. I'll text you it if it comes to mind.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much, Brittany, and I will see you soon for your wedding celebration.
I know. I'm so excited.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Do me a favor and please leave me a review and hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time on The Art of Relating.
Brother, live in a jungle concrete, like a belly gone to rumbling. Only wants a taste of the sky. Wind and fire set in the seeds for the son of his son to come with him one day. Taste the roots he was born from. Passing the story how all hands came together as one.